Hey, and welcome to Dragon Song, the one and the only podcast exclusively for Breath of Fire fans across the world. We're your hosts, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Livnat.
And today we're bringing to you Episode 2, Cross Counter, so named because it's the name of the first battle in Breath of Fire 2, and because we have some really important news, a major crossover between Breath of Fire and Capcom's mobile card game, Teppen. Now, if you're not familiar with Teppen, that's okay. We're not terribly familiar with it either, so we went and checked it out. And it is, as I said, a mobile card game. It's more or less modeled on card games that you may have played before, like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone and things like this. Except, of course, that unlike traditional, tabletop card games like Magic, it is digital. And we're going to talk about it in a minute if you're not familiar with it. But first of all, we wanted to talk about that magnificent announcement trailer and just how beautiful it was. There's really gorgeous artwork. I'm sure that if you're a Breath of Fire fan, you've probably seen it. If you haven't, you should go on YouTube right now and check it out. It's on the Breath of Fire YouTube channel as well as on Teppen's official channel. And it's really gorgeously produced and you should check it out.
We will put the link at the bio for sure. And just for those who are already hearing the podcast and want to test it out and check it, the expansion called Dragons of War. And it's really cool, even though I have some stuff that kind of rubs me the wrong way about it, but we will get into it. The art is magnificent, and I really, really love the rearrangement or the remix they did for the song. They took a song from Breath of Fire 3 from the OST, which is called Everyday Battle. There's another way to say it, Battle for Tomorrow. So
and it's always a good thing to hear songs from any of the main games, remixed or included in sort of modern games, because it's nostalgic and it kind of brings back us older gamers, but it also introduces it to a new audience. And we're really hoping that Teppen could do this and could be the sort of stepping stone to maybe a brighter future for the series. But like I said, let's take a look at the trailer or talk about it for a minute. As I said, it's a very beautifully produced sort of a storybook presentation. It opens up with this literal book sort of opening that says Teppen, the beginning of a new adventure. And we start going through it again as if it's a storybook. And it shows the banner for Dragons of War, this really beautiful artwork with Myria sort of, front and center, as the main villain of this crossover, evidently. And she's really beautifully rendered in her more human form, where she looks very beautiful and resplendent. And you've got Ryu and Nina and some of the Monster Hunter characters, because the primary sort of protagonists in this are the Breath of Fire and Monster Hunter and Mega Man X characters, which is really fun for any fans of those series as well. And I'm sure a lot of us Breath of Fire fans are. I myself have not played Monster Hunter, but I love Mega Man and Mega Man X. So the storybook opens by saying, "Hope glimmers amidst an epic conflict." And it goes forth to say, "Hundreds of years ago lived the Brood, a race of dragons with world-rending power. Fearing their strength, a goddess condemned them. She ordered the extermination of the Brood." And it's got this wonderful artwork where, again, Myria is standing forth sort of radiantly over this army of Victoroids from Mega Man X. And I haven't specifically played Mega Man X3. Our friend Gumi from the Breath of Fire Discord, which, by the way, you should all go check out, and, become members of. Gumi is familiar with this game and these characters and was pretty hyped about this. So I think it's a really cool inclusion, and it makes sense that Myria, who's a goddess of sort of order and supposed, security, would be presiding over an army of soulless robots who will do her bidding. But it goes on to say, "The goddess imbued an ancient sword with unimaginable power. She entrusted that power to a masked knight and bade him drive the Brood to the brink." And of course, a lot of this, has very strong parallels with what she asked Gar and the other Guardians to do. But to be honest with you, I'm not entirely certain who this masked figure is that they're referring to. I don't know if this is, part of the crossover. I'm assuming this is Monster Hunter related, but I don't know this. I don't recognize the sword. But again, I think it's very cool that they're touching on the actual story of Breath of Fire 3. What do you think about that, Livna? Does any of this kind of ring true to you as a fan of the series?
Yeah, I remember when I asked in the Discord what's their opinion about it. Few of them suggested the Monster Hunter, which kind of seems reasonable because they mentioned that the sword looks a little bit Monster Hunter in Origin. But to me, I felt like it could be some kind of a shout out to Breath of Fire 4 and the Dragon Slayer thing. And I did look around the plot a little bit, and there's supposed to be a traitor among the main group, so it could be referred to that, or the masked guardian could be Gar, which, by the way, you present with this card, and you can see Gaze like in the background right there, so that's adorable and amazing attention to details.
Yes, Gar's card, the artwork for which is present in the trailer, I'm looking at it right now, is really, really gorgeously done. Again, if you have not checked out the artwork that is present in this game so far that's been released, go ahead and do so, because to me, it's some of the most well-done art we've seen for Breath of Fire in some time. It's done in a bit of a different style than the games. It isn't the kind of standard anime art style that maybe we're familiar with in the series, that the official artwork tends to resemble, but it's more sort of, it has a kind of a hand-painted look, and it's really gorgeous. But like Livnot said, Geist is present in the background. He's got his kind of ghastly appearance. I love his name, by the way. And it says in this part of the story that, however, those brood possessing sentience gave no resistance and laid down their lives. Seeing this, a guardian tasked with the brood's extermination began to doubt his mission. And of course, we see a very remorseful Gar sort of looking at his hands as if kind of pondering what he's done. And of course, if you've played Breath of Fire 3, you're pretty familiar with this general story arc.
Yes, and I would like to add a few things. First of all, I remember when I saw a playthrough of Teppen that some cards can evolve. So they could do a guard card as a villain, and then it could evolve to a good guy with different stats, so maybe there's something. Also, I would like to add that like the idea that Myria control robots is kind of well done, because you remember she was in Junk City or something like that. She was in controlling a lot of very advanced cities where they completely like annihilate research and stuff. I remember there were a lot of robots near our area and stuff in the original Breath of Fire Group 3 game.
Yes, it had a very kind of a post-apocalyptic feel, and even leading up to the discovery of Myria, we're going through these cities and these areas that are digging up remnants of the past, and these, technological and mechanical sort of remnants. And yes, again, I think it was no accident that Myria is shown as a kind of a goddess of technology, or one who is relying on it to sort of enforce her will, because it's harder to control things that have free will, right? But the trailer goes on and says, as the sentient brood neared extinction, a boy was born. He was brood through and through. And of course it shows Ryu, sort of this adorable little birthing sequence. And then it shows him as a more fully grown guy as we recognize him in the games. And it goes on to say, moved by the boy's bonds with his comrades, the troubled guardian led him to confront the goddess. Again, we've got artwork of Nina and Ryu, Gar, and Peiko. Peiko's making his first appearance here in the trailer, and he's really well done. Looks like a little onion as usual, but he's got his cool little crest on his head, and you gotta love Peiko, right? Who doesn't love Peiko? And finally, the trailer concludes by asking, did the brood truly have to be destroyed? And it shows Ryu confronting Myria, at sword point. He's not messing around. And it says, at the end of their long journey, the truth will finally be revealed. So again, we're basically, with touches of Monster Hunter and Mega Man X, retelling the events of Breath of Fire 3, which is a really, pretty phenomenal story in its own right that more people should be aware of. And we are pretty excited that Teppen and this crossover are making that happen in 2021. It's a pretty big deal.
Yes, even though I have some resentment, because I'm not a fan of crossplay in a way. Like, I don't like the idea that they forced the Dragon Rider into the story and then explain that the broods are sentient, because they're different from the normal monsters that the riders are, incapable of control of. So that's one thing that really bothered me. I could actually completely go for the Victoroid on that sense. It's just the thing, because in Breath of Fire 3, what happened is that Dragon never fought back, so now you have a riders that fought back, so how would ever Gar would have some kind of doubts if he ended up fighting? So I guess we will see. But overall, it was pretty cool.
I think it works really well because, again, it's intended to be a crossover. And so the nature of any crossover is that you're going to have some gray areas and some areas where the intersection doesn't really make as much sense or work as well, maybe ideally as you would like. But the whole point is really to kind of promote the various series that are involved and kind of let the characters interact in a fun way. And to me, they melded this all together as well as they possibly could have, because to me, it still feels like Breath of Fire. It doesn't feel to me as if they put Breath of Fire into the world of Monster Hunter or Mega Man X. It looks like they put Monster Hunter and Mega Man X in the world of Breath of Fire, and I'm very excited about that. We still have Myria as the central villain, and it looks like she has all of her complexity from Breath of Fire 3. It looks like she has all of her history. I am personally really happy that Capcom seems not to be forgetting those things. It's acknowledging it and even celebrating it with, at the very least, if nothing else comes out of this, at the very least with some very beautiful artwork that's really, really well produced, very, very professionally done, a remix of music that we are all familiar with and love, and, you know, a new kind of a way of reconnecting with these old characters that we all love. I mean, just to me, the fact that Gar, Peiko, Nina, and Ryu are in a game that's coming out in 2021. Now, granted, again, if you're not familiar with Teppen, let's talk about that for a minute. Teppen is...
I just want to say one last thing. I guess what really rubs me the wrong way, it's not directly or explicitly say Breath of Fire anywhere. So I wonder if other expansion that brought other character of Capcom in war like that, so I need to check it, but if not, that was a little bit of disappointing, because, you know, Dragons of War, but a lot of people may not associate it with Breath of Fire, so I guess.
So again, if you have not heard of Teppen or haven't played it, you're not alone. It's not necessarily the most well-known game, but we've looked into it a bit, and it looks pretty fun. I have not had a chance to play it. I want to as soon as possible, but it's a fairly large game. Let me put out there. It's 1.7 gigabytes, the last I checked on the Google Play Store. So it's a fairly big file, but especially for, you know, kind of a mobile card game. But again, it is a mobile card game. It's somewhat similar to Magic the Gathering, in my mind, at least on the surface from what I've seen. You have units that function largely like creatures in Magic or games like that, where they have a life counter. They have power and hit points that are represented by, you know, a number over a number. Like, for example, let's say 3-5. The character would have 3, you know, offensive power and 5 hit points. And the way that it works is that it's real time. Unlike a tabletop card game, of course, that tends to be turn-based, you have a magic meter that is increasing over time, and that's what allows you to cast spells. Spells seem to have, both units and spells seem to have a numerical cost, and that may be anywhere from, you know, say 3, 4, or 5 or whatever. Of course, the higher it is, the longer it takes to cast. So you have to decide, you know, between less expensive and more expensive spells. Again, if you're familiar with Magic and games like that, you know, maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon and things like that, you know that there are casting costs associated with the cards and that sort of thing. But another fun thing about Teppen is that you choose a hero, and the hero seems to sort of define the theme of the deck, because every hero and unit has colors, and when those colors are aligned, the units, apparently, the sort of the creature cards of Teppen can have kind of special properties that then come to the fore. So again, unfortunately, I'm not really intimately familiar with Teppen, and in a future episode, I'm hoping to be able to talk about it a little more, knowledgeably, and maybe bring on guests who even play it at a high level. But for now, just looking over it, it looks like a really fun game that I would be potentially interested in.
Yeah, and you forgot one of the most catchiest thing about it. It's real time. Like, the stress is on. Like, usually in card game, you know, each player has a move and their time, they can take their time. And usually, to be honest, I remember someone told me that the best way to win a card game is actually to tire your opponent out, to take your moves slowly. That's a very known strategy. But in this, like, if you blink, you miss. Like it's constantly on, and it's constantly on the move. So there was that.
Yes, and it has a very, very beautiful interface, because what happens is, again, you have your hero character that's sort of like the commander of your deck, the sort of the whole theme behind your deck. And this can be anyone from Ryu to Morrigan to Chun-Li to whomever. You know, a lot of major Capcom characters are available, which looks fun. And they're on each side of the screen, and then there's sort of a play area where you put your units and then you cast spells. And when you place units, it looks like essentially what happens is there's an arrow that goes across. There's kind of an arrow that represents your attack. When it reaches a unit or a hero, it will begin to deal damage. And much like in Magic, you know, let's say you have a 3/3 that goes up against a 3/5. They'll each deal 3 damage to each other, but of course the 3/3 will die because it only has 3 hit points. The 3/5 will not. It will continue to go on. And if it's not stopped, it will then deal damage to the hero and thus to the player. It looks fun. It's very dynamic, and I can't wait to check it out. But let's talk for a minute about the more Breath of Fire specific stuff about this. We've got some really interesting characters that are appearing in this crossover.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We've got Momo. We've got Peko. We've got Nina and Ryu, Geist, and Gar. And from a screenshot, definitely Days will make an appearance of some kind. And Myria, obviously.
Myria may be the most exciting one to me, because I have long been saying, especially with the appeal of Lady Dimitrescu in Resident Evil 8, Capcom needs to really capitalize on one of their best villains from Breath of Fire, or one of their best villains in general in my mind, which is Myria. I mean, she's a really phenomenal, complex, and compelling villain.
Exactly. And I am bothered that I didn't see any artwork of Ray. I mean, he's kind of the big star of Breath of Fire 3, kind of, you know?
Maybe they're holding out on us. Maybe they're waiting to reveal him, you know, at a kind of an exciting, maybe they're waiting to reveal him sort of on his own. Maybe he'll get his own trailer or something. I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath, but I'd be excited about it. Yeah, he's probably my favorite playable character from 3. I'm not going to lie. He's really cool.
And we do know there's supposed to be some kind of a traitor in that story. So it could be Tipo, or it could be someone from, like, known NPC or figure from Monster Hunter. But I'm intrigued. I mean, I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to think who else in the game was a big deal aside of the main characters, and I cannot think of anyone. Maybe they could introduce Bilo and Sander. I guess they were a kind of big deal, at least at the start of the game.
Sure.
Maybe Bunyan.
I had totally forgotten. I was not even thinking about Tipo as being the masked figure, because I don't remember that they specifically said that he was masked in Breath of Fire 3, and maybe I'm just not remembering that correctly, but that would be a really cool way to deal with the whole Tipo storyline. Let's talk for a minute about what this means for the series and how Breath of Fire has crossed over with other games in the past, because it has happened. And unfortunately, as we all know, as Breath of Fire fans, we haven't gotten any main entries in a while, except the kind of, you know, disappointing Breath of Fire 6 that a lot of us would like to forget on the whole. We've had stuff like the characters appearing in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 as cards, right?
Yeah, they
and in endings.
Yeah, they appear in the ending scene. I think Ray has a scene, and either Cray or Gar. I could be mistaken. And then they also appear in, I forgot the name of the series, but it was again another versus Capcom where there were a few card fighters. There was
SNK versus Capcom?
Yeah, there were like Myria and I think Myria, Ryu from Breath of Fire 1, and you have Nina from Breath of Fire 2, and you have Fao Lu, and I'm pretty sure Lin from Breath of Fire 5. I could be forgetting anyone, but...
Well, one thing that I'd like to point out that's really important here about Ultimate MVC3 is that some of the characters from Breath of Fire were almost not only appearing in the game as background characters, they were almost playable. And who were they, Livnot?
Oh, right. I remember they talked about Fao Lu as an option, and even Nina from Breath of Fire 1, but they had to cut down
and Nina was the one that got nearest to making it in, yeah.
So that was pretty cool,
Surprisingly.
because if anyone should be, definitely Nina from Breath of Fire 1. She have the weapon and everything, so that's kind of cool. The butterfly sword.
I think Foul Lu would have made more sense for the type of game that Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is, given the, ubiquity of characters like Zero and that sort of thing in the game. But apparently not enough people in the Western market were familiar with Foul Lu, or that was the thinking with the development team. So, but yeah, so Breath of Fire has made appearances in Pocket Fighter.
The PS1 version.
More recently, okay, good point. But more recently, there was, of course, a cat outfit in Street Fighter V for Falk, which was really fun. It looks really nice. It actually looks like cat, which is cool. And there were also some Breath of Fire tracks as DLC.
Yes, we got the Destiny Child and the Cross Counter DLC, track DLCs, as far as I remember.
Which, again, we do like Cross Counter. That is, of course, the theme for this podcast. It's a really great battle theme. Not only in Breath of Fire, but in RPG history in general.
Yes.
But I want to talk for a minute about what this means for the series. Because, okay, I've seen some people on Twitter who were disappointed that it's only a crossover and that there wasn't something bigger announced, like an actual independent game or another port or something like that. I actually am personally more excited about this crossover than I would have been for simply another port. Certainly unless it would have been a very major port, like a huge collection for the Switch or something. And I'll tell you why. This crossover, I think, has the potential to not only introduce more people to the series and raise awareness of it, especially with its beautiful artwork and that kind of thing, but I think it may be the gateway to really bringing Breath of Fire back to the fore, where maybe it might generate enough steam to get another main entry. And again, that's a big might. We don't know what Capcom is going to do. They've expressed the non-viability of JRPGs on the current market from their standpoint, a number of times, and they've been very clear on that. But they keep seeming to flirt with the idea of sort of feeding Breath of Fire back to the players in some form or another. And I think it's a good sign to me, as long as they're making new content that's Breath of Fire centered. It's even better than tossing out ports and things like that, because anyone can put out a port. It doesn't take a lot of creative effort, but if they're hiring artists to render these characters and bring them forth into kind of a more modern style and put them into modern games. We've seen this happen with Capcom before. Characters that they've put in the background in Street Fighter and MVC and things like this wind up making it into playable roles at some point. They have a history of this.
True, but at the same time, like, they're completely toying with us in the way that they could reach to the actual audience and ask what they want. I mean, I just feel like they finally gave us a Breath of Fire game, but it was completely not the way it should have been handled or done. I mean, if you want me, I can go into details and as why I'm thinking why this actually crossplay is actually better than what we got, but still it's a little bit concerning. If you want,
let's talk about the concern.
Okay.
A lot of people on Twitter and elsewhere are not happy about the fact that this is a mobile game and that it's free to play, because as we all know, that involves microtransactions
and live service.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. It is a gacha game. The game is designed to encourage you to pump money into it to get characters that maybe are otherwise harder to get. And from my experience, I'm not personally familiar with Teppen. I don't know how fair or unfair it is with these practices. The only gachas that I've really played along these lines are Fire Emblem Heroes and Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. I found Heroes to be much fairer about it and to be much more robust for a free-to-play player. And I can say that at one point in my life, I was very opposed to the whole idea of free-to-play games. I didn't like the model. Now that I've started playing Fire Emblem Heroes, I can say as a mostly free-to-play player that you can get a really good experience out of it. And if you know what you're doing, if you are smart with your summons, you can do rather well with it, even in the competitive modes in the game. Again, that being said, I'm not too sure about Teppen. We're going to have to see about it going forward when hopefully we all kind of as a community get more familiar with Teppen itself. But what's your viewpoint on that?
I think generally there's a lot of free-to-play game that could be good and not too consuming if you know exactly what to do with them. For example, I'm totally absorbed in Pokemon Go right now, and I was a big fan of the original game, but I remember that pretty much after Emerald, I kind of lost touch with it. Like, I didn't feel like embracing in a full game, and like the quick on-the-go thing was kind of okay to me, so I can kind of see how Fire Emblem Hero deal with that. The same way that I keep saying, oh my god, just give us like a Breath of Fire 4 fishing game. I'd be happy. I'd play it daily. And apparently there was a game like that, but it was released only in Japan. So Capcom, if you hear this, please, I really want to play a Breath of Fire 4 fishing game. I'd love it.
Yeah, that would be money. They would be printing money if they did that. I mean, I'm not saying that it would be like, market dominating across, the entirety of mobile games, but I think that within that niche, it would do really well.
I'm just saying, like, they could do a complete, like, Ant City, like the fairy village kind of deal, like Fallout Shelter, and that would be fine with me completely, or just a little bit hero play and stuff. But my issues are this. Okay, right now, Teppen is blocked on my store. Okay, so, and this happens a lot with a lot of mobile games, okay, that like not a lot of region has reached to it. I mean, I remember that like Pokemon Go was released here in Israel about 2 years after the game was launched, and by that time it was kind of too late in terms of a game kind of deal, even though now they're backing up and stuff. But it's just sad to think that they do it. I mean, and it's exactly the same mistake that happened with Breath of Fire 6. I think a lot of people would have liked to give it a chance, but it never aired out of Japan, and this is a problematic issue. I mean, you have fans which are globally, and once you kind of block a regions or countries from it, that's kind of wrong. I mean, I can't still download Fire Emblem Heroes. I can't play it on my regular store, and that's a bummer. I mean, that's even worse than like YouTube blocking videos from your country. I mean, you could view it one way or another. I mean, you could play it in a certain way, but why would I need to go backflipping gymnastic just to play a game? I just think it's against their benefits. Now, another thing that I want to mention is like I always had issue with full games reaching mobile market, because I do feel it's lazy. I do feel like there's something about it that they count on the money. Just like if you remember the whole presentation of Diablo Immortal, when the fan actually wanted more expansion and more, shout out to the actual Diablo core fans that were sticking through and through. It's like, no, we don't want mobile. Stop. I know mobile are a big deal in Japan and the country region, but like you have a big audience that want to play game in the more traditional way. I mean, they have console, they have game. They don't see the phone as a full gaming device. Like, it's not implanted like that. The mentality is not there yet. So you miss a lot of audience about it, and it does feel disrespectful. However, unlike Breath of Fire 6, it was supposed to be a full game, and it was heavily microtransaction. I remember they totally played about the fact that you have heroes and you can buy costume, and they totally played on it, which was bad. But when you have crossover, it's a little bit less bad, because it kind of gives a small nods to the fans that we haven't forgot you. You know, you can play it or not. It's not a mainstream game. Like, it's not a main game. You won't lose anything by playing it or seeing it. It's just there. Just exactly that I was totally okay with the Witcher Battle Arena, which, hey, let's just take the character and let them fight each other. That's just fine with me, because it's not a game per se. You don't have blood, you don't have anything in it. And just things like that, cards are okay. They are okay. And let's forget, we as a fan didn't get anything ever since the shutdown, and I think 2019, where they shut down Breath of Fire 6, which was, again, chapter by chapter. You don't get the full game. You get the game by parts, and that's a very known thing with the mobile, that like updates are taking forever to get.
But like I said, I'm choosing to remain positive about it and optimistic because, again, we know what this is going in. It's not a full game. Maybe we would have liked to see that, but that would be ideally. And we know that this is, not a perfect world. Myria has made us very aware of that. And so knowing that it's a crossover, knowing that it's mobile and that there are transactions, microtransactions, I'm fine with it. We can all check it out and choose whether or not we want to engage with it any further.
That's true.
And I think that I'll have fun with it personally, but that remains to be seen.
Yes.
So let's get
just one last thing that I want to say. I mean, they had a booth at E3, and they didn't announce the game. I think that's a total miss on Capcom.
Oh my God, yeah, that was a big mistake. That was a huge mistake, in my opinion. We, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, a lot of you were in there with us. We did a kind of a watch party on the Breath of Fire Discord. Again, if you're not on the Breath of Fire Discord, go and check it out. Find me or Livnat on Twitter. We can send you an invite link. But it's a great little community, and about 10 or so of us got together and watched the Capcom E3. We all were pretending that we didn't have high hopes about it. We all told ourselves very stoically that, we knew Breath of Fire wasn't going to be a part of it, and we weren't going to be disappointed if it wasn't. But of course, not only was Breath of Fire not a part of it, hardly anything was really in the announcement because they didn't really show shit. And it was a massive, failure, a massive disappointment, and people were not really crazy with Capcom's E3 this year. But for some reason, they chose to, save the Teppen thing for afterwards. And maybe that's for the better because that way, it didn't have its thunder stolen by the rest of the abysmal E3. It wasn't sort of lumped in with that. And I think the Teppen trailer was pretty well received, especially by Breath of Fire fans. But let's move forward to one of the funnest parts of the show, and that is fishing for questions. We go to our audience. We want to hear from our listeners. We really do. And so we've gotten questions from Twitter, Discord, and even WhatsApp. And again, for every episode, we put an open forum out on Twitter and Discord. If you've got questions, we have answers. So from Zan Moff, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, I probably am, from Twitter, we have, "It's so good to see that this story and these characters still have life. Do you think they should continue to have Ryu be a main character for a future title, or should another/new character take the lead?"
Yes, definitely yes. I mean, one of the things that completely threw me off of Breath of Fire 6 is the fact that you play a different character. I mean, it doesn't feel Breath of Fire at that moment. It feel like a spin-off. It feel like exactly how Lufia game for the GBA felt, where you play different character and you don't actually play what's her name, Hareen. So yeah, I think Ryu should definitely be her main character, or they should just do a spin-off and not call it Breath of Fire, but kind of mention it's the word. That's mostly my way. Even though Breath of Fire 6 probably have the sexiest Ryu, it's still a big no. I want to play as Ryu. I don't want to play as a different character. So
makes sense. I actually found that the sort of role switching in Dragon Quarter, where you have Ryu and Nina sort of switching off as the silent, protagonist characters, was enough of a stretch. It worked there. I thought it was a really cool subversion of the usual tropes of the series. But I have to agree with Livnat. I wouldn't want to see them go much beyond that, at least for now. If they put out a new Breath of Fire main title now, I would want to see Ryu be the main because, I want something familiar, to be honest. Now, if we start to get more Breath of Fire content, more consistently, then yeah, they could experiment a bit and maybe that would work out. Kind of like they've done with the Zelda series, although you don't see any mainline Zelda games where Link isn't the main character yet. So that's something to be pointed out. So, okay, from Raz we have, so first off, I'm glad to see Breath of Fire getting some recognition from Capcom. Do you think this means the series will be getting a bit more attention, even if it's just for merchandising or playing on nostalgia? And that's the first part. Second off, I love that they went with 3 for this one, and the way they made it fit appeals to me, but do you think they will do something similar for 4 or Dragon Quarter? Very good questions. First of all, I too am glad to see that Breath of Fire is, getting some love from Capcom. I think it's a good sign. I guess time will tell how much attention it gets and whether it really develops into anything. I think it's a good sign. Like I said, I'm being optimistic. I think Liv Not, as she's expressed in the episode so far, is a little more pessimistic about it, and I get it. It's probably a very realist, viewpoint. But I think that with the love that's been poured into the artwork for this Teppen crossover, and especially the lore that's been delved into, the attention to the more minor characters, I think we're looking at more than just merchandising and kind of playing off of players' nostalgia. And again, there's no way to tell at this point whether 4 or Dragon Quarter will make it in, but I think that's why we should all check it out and try to at least be as supportive as we can as fans, because that will make it more likely that 4 or Dragon Quarter do make it in.
My opinion is this. First of all, we gotta dig more into the details of the Teppen game and realize that just how much Capcom is involved. Because my gut feeling is kind of telling me it's not about Capcom, it's someone who is a very big fan of Breath of Fire 3, and he wants to see it there, and he pushes forward with that, because I don't remember seeing Capcom playing too much with Breath of Fire 3 aside of the main events, but here they completely go out with that. To me, it always feels like Capcom mainly focused on 4 and 2. You can definitely see it at Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter. It's a big shout out to Breath of Fire 2 and a lot of nostalgia for 4. So I kind of think if there is some involvement of Capcom, it's more about giving the rights to whoever behind this, and it looks like whoever behind this is a fan. So that's what I think, and I'm pretty sure like Capcom kind of living out the nostalgia. They do. I think they do try to push it a little bit. I just feel like their Breath of Fire is kind of pushed to the side, and you can see it by the fact that Teppen tweeted and just put an hashtag buff. Just, nobody knows exactly what it is, and I kind of felt that the trailer does not specifically say Breath of Fire. So it's hard to tell.
It's a good point. Okay, so from Nate Wright on Twitter, we have, I'm interested in the crossroads that I see the series at. Maybe side gigs like this and the SF4 cat costume means Capcom is considering a revival. But I worry Breath of Fire has been relegated to low-risk crossovers to get money out of a niche fandom that couldn't support a full release. I think that's, I would say, a very valid concern. And at the same time, like I said, I'm glad that Breath of Fire is getting something, even if it's just crossovers and minor ports. Again, on the idea that they're appealing to a niche fandom, I think that for better or worse, that essentially just means that it falls on us to try to do what we can to raise awareness of the series and to support it. We've got to be willing to actually buy a potential game when it comes out. We have to show Capcom that there is enough support for that to happen, and that hasn't happened yet. Because again, I think people understandably get frustrated with Capcom because they see the series as being very worthwhile and something that should be invested in. But Capcom is a business, and the JRPG market has been pretty competitive and kind of volatile in the last 15, 20 years. It had kind of a heyday in the late 90s, and that's not the case anymore. It's starting to make something of a revival. I personally think that Breath of Fire could work, but that's a big could. It's a hypothetical, and so it also falls on us as fans to make it clear that there is enough support for it.
It's also important to mention that most of the original team that used to work on Breath of Fire, the Breath of Fire series, are no longer part of Capcom, especially the artist. I forgot his name. And that's a big blow to anything that has to do with a true revival of Breath of Fire in the true essence of the art style. But again, I could be blown away by something completely different. To me, Capcom abandoned a lot of other series, but at the same time, it is curious that Breath of Fire appearing more and more. So I have big trust in our community. We are a great community, and maybe we are reaching them in a way.
I hope so. Okay, so from Gumi, our friend on Discord, we have, why does my Teppen keep crashing? With the little funny, or emoji. I admit I'm hoping that the other games will be repped as well, or just 3. I'm wondering why the event is crossing over with Mega Man X. I mean, I ain't complaining, mind you, because as I mentioned before, Gumi's a fan of Mega Man X. As I joked on Discord, I unfortunately, don't know why Teppen is crashing right now. I hope that's resolved, certainly before the Dragon Wars crossover releases. But as we mentioned before, we too are also hoping that the other games will be repped. I'm a big fan of Breath of Fire 2. I think it would be very cool if the first game got some kind of representation as well, because it's the OG. The Mega Man X, crossover looks a little weird on paper, but like I said, when you see that image of Myria with the Victoroids, it makes sense to me that you had those ruins that she was sort of hanging out in 3 that were very, post-apocalyptic and sort of, nightmarishly dystopian with all the mechanical stuff. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and don't forget, like, one of the enemies in Breath of Fire 1, I think Goda, kind of looked the style of Mega Man. I mean, yeah, the artist, the original artist was one of Mega Man artists, so it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it's kind of fitting, especially with the whole robot scene from Breath of Fire 1. So
the series has always flirted with these kind of, golem type figures, right? Like not so much, Gundam level of like mechs and robots and things like that, but more kind of primitive, like androids that are, roughly kind of like these bulky human shapes.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally, the last question from WhatsApp, my amazing sister Kate, whom I love very much. Thanks, Kater, for the question. Thanks for listening. She says, do you think they'll put Cat into it? I'm not super sure how Teppen works, and if so, how badass will she be compared to the game? Well, of course, I'm hoping Cat will make it in, and that gets into the whole question of whether, Breath of Fire 2 will get any rep. Again, time will tell. I'm very hopeful that it will be the case. I think, of course, that if this Breath of Fire 3 crossover does well, it's very likely that she will make it in, because, let's face it, if Breath of Fire 2 gets in, Cat is sure as hell getting in, because she's a fan favorite, and again, I don't really know how Teppen plays, but I'm hoping, and I have to believe, that if she makes it in, she'll be pretty damn badass. But it's hard to compare her to her original appearance in 2 because her attack animations are incredible, twirling the stick around, whether she's playable or non-playable. When you encounter her at the Coliseum, she's a total badass too. And I love how she has separate animations for her NPC and her playable role. But hoping Cat will make it in, and hope she's just as badass as she always is.
And hopefully Nina from Breath of Fire 2, because she is amazing and awesome.
Best Nina, for sure. Okay, so that about does it for this episode. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'd like to put a bow on this, little foray by saying, once again, that this is a really huge deal. And this may be a kind of a crossroads for the Breath of Fire series. Again, that's why we entitled the episode Cross Counter. It is a cross counter. It is an encounter with some other very popular Capcom series, and I think it's a way for Capcom to test whether it can stand up and exist at the same level of hype as Monster Hunter and Mega Man X. I think that it can, and I think that there are a lot of Breath of Fire fans around the world who just as passionately believe that. But we have to show it, so we have to do hashtag Bring Back Breath of Fire. We have to do hashtag We Desire Breath of Fire. We have to get Capcom's attention, and most importantly, we should all try to at least check out Teppen. Give it a download. Again, it's a free-to-play game. You're not losing anything by simply checking it out. Show Capcom that Breath of Fire puts butts in the seats and gets people's attention.
Exactly.
So with that, we're going to say adieu, and we're your hosts. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Livnat.
And we're wishing you a great one, and we'll catch you later.
Smell ya laters.